Hey, Bostin.
What up?
How you doing, buddy?
Good.
Oh, Larry.
Hey, how are you?
Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You haven't lost any size since the last video I've seen of you.
I don't know when that was.
Today I was just catching up. Well, for our viewers to know, today we have a guest, Larry Pollock, who's a friend of Bostin's father's, which I just discovered today. And he has a beautiful story. In fact, I want to refer viewers to the video that you have from Fresh Out. It has over 3 million views describing parts of your incredible story. But before we do, very excited to have you here. I wanted to go through some housekeeping items. The first thing is I wanted to tell our audience that I responded to Antoine Vaillant's wonderful relapse video with a long video. It got some good attention, and Antoine wanted to have me on his podcast to discuss some issues with sobriety and recovery and stuff like that. So hopefully we'll be able to do that later and then have Antoine on our podcast with Bostin. That's one thing. The second thing I want to mention is something crazy happened to me this weekend. So I've had COVID before. My wife has had COVID before. Not only that, but we're both vaccinated twice by Pfizer. Like a few days ago, 4 days ago, my wife starts having breathing issues. She has 2 weeks left on her pregnancy. Okay. She starts having breathing issues. She starts feeling sick. I get worried. Now I try to keep my wife to herself this whole pregnancy. But you know, if you're alone during the pregnancy, you start to get lonely. You have to see your friends. So every once in a while, my wife went to see her friends. She went to see them last week. She comes back with this illness. Over the weekend, we had to go to the hospital. She was in the ICU for 2 days. Fever very high, breathing issues. We were worried that they were going to, remember I told you Boston on text that they were going to force the babies. So anyway, I'm a little bit out of it today. So I'm not totally there. I have COVID. I'm a little bit out of it.
Is she back home now?
Yeah, she's home. She's home now. She's okay. She's stabilized and everything. But the concern becomes this, man. How many times does a baby have to encounter this Chinese virus before it affects it? I mean, once before during the pregnancy in the beginning, then the vaccines, and then now this. So, you know, I'm just worried. I don't know what the effects will be long-term on the baby. But anyway, let's move on to happier subjects. John Meadows commented on the post we made about Larry Pollock. He said, Larry Pollock has great stories. And that's an understatement. So Larry, can you tell us the beginning of your life, how you ended up at Gold's Gym, where are you from, and how you got introduced to steroids when in your late teens, I would say?
Well, I started training at 13, and it just so happened I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, which at the time was where Weider headquarters was at. And so all the pro bodybuilders from all over the world were right there because they came to work under Weider contracts, and they were, filmed for the magazines, Muscle and Fitness and all that. So like the first pro bodybuilder I met was Tom Platz. And that was 1 week before the 81 Olympia when he was guest posing at this little show in Santa Monica.
Oh, wow.
And I met him and he was sitting in the bleachers, and, you know, I'm a kid, so I just went up and talked to him. And he autographed and gave me his upper body training manual and his leg training manual. And then he went and guest posed, and he just blew my mind. He looked unreal. And my father had brought me there, and my father said, that's grotesque. And I said, I'm going to be just like that. So then I had a little weight set in my house that I used, and my father would take me to the racket club, but I finally wanted to go to the real gyms because I saw it in the magazines. So I went down I worked at a little gym for just a few weeks in the Valley. And then I went to Don Peters' gym, which later became Gold's Gym. And the first day that I went there, I was standing in front, looking in the window, and I saw this two humongous shoulders with the gigantic arms. And it was I thought it was a gorilla, for real. And there was 2 white guys on the side handing him these ginormous dumbbells. And he was pressing him in some weird, like strange movement. And I literally thought that they taught a gorilla to lift weights because I couldn't believe that was a human.
Is that Victor Richards?
No, actually, they took the weights from him when he was done. He stood up, and it was Bertil Fox.
Oh, okay, that's similar.
And he was just gigantic. So I signed up at that gym, and I was, I think, probably 15,
Oh,
maybe 14, 15, something like that. And at the time, Lee Haney was training there. Rich Gasperi came. Matt Mendenhall was there. And it was Don Peters' gym. It later became Gold's gym. And later it moved to Northridge, and that Boston's father took it over. So I started like training with pro bodybuilders as a kid.
some people were mentioning in our question section that did you used to train with Mentzer also? Was Mentzer still there?
So no, I met Mike Mentzer a couple years later when I think it was a few years later. I was 19 when I met Mike.
So how did you go from 15, being an aficionado of bodybuilding, probably not using any steroids, to being a very interesting person at 19, 20, which we're going to get into? But I mean, the guns, the steroids, the crazy lifestyle, how did that escalate in your teenage years?
So what happened was I did my first show at 16, and Mike Sable was my trainer. And I won my first show at 16. And then I did a few other shows, and I kept winning. And I won the Teen USA when I was 18. And that same year, I took second to Sean Ray at the Teen America.
Wow.
And I didn't know that Sean Ray was going to be Sean Ray. He was just this guy that another teenager I was competing against. And shortly after that, I met Mike Mentzer. And a mutual friend of ours introduced us. And when I met Mike, he hadn't been lifting in a long time. And he was really skinny with a pot belly. And I couldn't, he was the Mike Mentzer I saw in magazines, and I couldn't believe it was him. But I always looked up to him. He was like one of my bodybuilding heroes. And so I convinced him to train with me. And at the time, I was living at home, but I really wasn't, it wasn't working out. So he asked me if I want to move in with him.
Oh, wow. I didn't know this.
I didn't realize that moving in also meant that I got to pay the rent and all the food bills and everything else. And, but I did because I wanted him to train with me. And so I used to have to bribe him to go to the gym. Mike had a little habit, amphetamine habit.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that too.
So to get him to train with me, basically, I would take him to the meth dealer, who was a friend of mine, and buy him his meth. And that's how I get him to go to the gym and train.
Two questions about that. Did you notice, I'm sure there's a bit deeper into the story, but did you ever figure out like why he seemed depressive at that age? It wasn't training. What do you think it was, the drugs or something that he got upset with bodybuilding because of how he played?
No, he was like stuck on that 1980 Olympia.
Oh, he was? Okay.
Yeah, he was just, he couldn't get over it.
The second thing I wanted to ask was he, I mean, in those days, people used to take amphetamines often orally. Was he smoking or injecting it or just oral stuff?
So here was our protocol. We'd start out at the apartment and we'd take what's called an Obitrol, which is basically like a Adderall. It's like 5 amphetamines in one thing.
Okay.
And then we drive all the way from Hollywood to the San Fernando Valley to, I think it was somewhere like Northridge, to the meth dealer, and he'd get the meth. Then we drive back to Studio City, and we'd go to this espresso shop, and we'd take 5 milligram dexedrine.
Oh, okay.
And he'd take the meth. I didn't take the meth. And then we'd take a double espresso, and then we'd go next door to the Nautilus and train. But by the time we were walking into there, we were just like jacked out of our minds.
That's quite a pre-workout.
Yeah.
Larry,
a little bit overkill.
Exactly. How often did people back in the day, even in the 70s, 80s, use amphetamines? Because, in like baseball, those greenies were really popular. People were using amphetamines in sports. Was it common here, or was it just Mentzer? Well,
even before I met Mentzer, when I trained for the Teen USA, which I won at 18, someone had given me fasted diet pills. And I ate nothing but distilled water, red snapper, and lettuce for like 6 weeks.
Oh my
And I lived on fasted diet pills and Trenbolone for 6 weeks. I was shredded, but flat, of course. But I won because they hadn't seen shredded like that before.
Before we leave Mentzer on the subject, because one of the questions we asked were people were curious about Mike Mentzer's preferences with steroids. Like they mentioned that he liked NPP only cycles or DECA only cycles. Do you remember?
We took 300 milligrams of NPP every other day.
And that was his main thing.
That was it. Totally.
Oh, wow. Really?
That's all we took.
What were other people like in those days? I mean, can I ask you, how did you see people's choice of androgens change? Because you have an intimate involvement, change from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. You mentioned was popular.
So Mentzer was, I think, kind of like what he did was more from the 70s because, you know, before I even trained with Mentzer, I trained with Lee Haney and Rich Gasperi. And they were big on parabolin and equipoise. And then pre-conscious, of course, used Winstrol and whatever else. Honestly, I don't think the drugs changed that much.
Really?
No. I mean, people think that there's new drugs and things are better. We had all the same drugs.
Yeah, not only that, but Larry, every time I hear somebody interviewed from the 70s or 80s, when they're talking amongst each other, like Jerry Brainham and these guys, they'll sometimes mention like, oh, that guy was taking grams at a time in the 70s. So even the doses, some people would escalate the doses back then, right?
I don't think people took as much as
not as much, huh?
As they did in the 90s. No.
Interesting.
I mean, we thought we were taking a lot. I would take, 300 milligrams of equipoise and probably 200 milligrams of parabolin and whatever else. And then we got Finajet, which was a trenbolone acetate. But the dosages were not like crazy out there. I mean, if you were taking a gram a week, that was considered like a lot.
Okay. Before we leave Mentzer, did you get to meet him much before his death? And see and what was your analysis of how he passed so early and tragically?
So I hadn't seen him for a number of years because I went to prison when I was 20. When I got out of prison, I got a job at this knife selling company. And the first thing they told you to do is go see everybody you know and try to sell knives. So of course I went to him and I did this knife demonstration. He had no interest in the knives.
But he was a kitchen knives, guys, not random knives.
Those knives were amazing. He worked for Cutco.
Yeah,
he brought him kitchen.
They were good knives. I sold a lot of them too.
Yeah. Well, let's just mention for the audience. So we're going to get into the first prison story, but basically Larry went to prison for a period of time, then became an amazing knife seller for a period of years. And then there's a second story we'll get to. But anyway, you're saying in the knife period days, you met Mentzer.
Well, actually, I knew Mentzer already from when I was younger, but I went to see him. And so I tried to sell him knives and he wanted something else from me. And I was like, not into that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. He had I guess he flipped somewhere.
Oh, really?
Along the line. Yeah.
Well, that's so, I didn't know what you were talking about, but that happens with that drug though, doesn't it, Larry? Don't you notice that sometimes?
I don't know, but I was just like, dude, really? Like,
they have a saying in the East Coast, what's the difference between a straight guy and a gay guy? And they say it's a $20 bag of meth. So I heard this in LA when I first moved here. Anyway.
Well, there was some stuff going on back then with a lot of the pros. Even when I was young, it was pretty prevalent.
Well, Larry, I've always tried to ask people about that, but they're so reluctant to talk about it. One of the people who talked about it to me was Scot, our mutual friend. But was it really that prevalent back in those days? Especially?
Yeah, it was really like that.
Ah, okay.
Like I lived with Mike and we lived in this apartment that I paid the rent, but it was super cheap because the building manager was this guy named Lacey Rich, some gay guy. And when I'd go to take the trash out, he'd be like peeking at me, and I'd throw trash at him, like, get out of here, you fag.
Back in the day.
But he had pros coming in and out of his apartment. And yeah, I mean, they were doing the gay for pay thing. And I think it was more prevalent than people even know, because there was no money in bodybuilding back then.
I know. I'll basically hear crazy stories from some pros. Like, we signed up with Weeder. Before we signed up, they told us you're going to have to do some things. You're going to have to meet some people. It was very direct. And then I'll meet other people from the 80s and 90s that'll say, I never heard of that ever. Weeder never mentioned it to me. Nobody talked to me about it. So sometimes...
When I was living with Mike, I got assigned to drive these pros that came in from out of town, mostly Europeans, whatever, to their photo shoots. Because I had a car and I was willing to do it. So I used to drive them like Edward Kowak, a few other pros, to their photo shoots. And Weeder would always be there. He'd be like, let me put on the oil. Let me put on the oil. And he'd be just like rubbing these guys, and they'd be standing there, he'd be rubbing the oil all over them. And he'd look at me and goes, why are you always here? You're always here. I was a kid. I'm like, I don't know.
Anyway, so how did you get into this crazy incident when you were 19 or 20 when it happened? That just changed your life irreparably. How did it happen?
So what happened was, I just done Teen America when I was 19 and didn't place as well as I wanted to because I messed up my carb load thing. But anyways, right after that, I got colitis.
Oh.
And it wasn't like a long sickness. It was like all of a sudden I was crapping blood and I was in emergency. And I had to have emergency surgery to take my colon out.
Oh, you had your colon removed. Okay.
Completely removed.
I have Crohn's disease, by the way.
Yeah, me too.
You have Crohn's also after the colon was removed?
No, so what happened was I removed the colon, then I'll tell you how that later. 30 years later, I got Crohn's.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And I know what causes it. And there, by the way, there's a lot of bodybuilders and people in the bodybuilding community that have colitis and Crohn's.
I know. I always talk about it, Larry. Nobody talks about it. I always mention that's one of the most common side effects from that lifestyle, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I know why.
Why do you think it is?
It's dehydration.
Oh, could be also.
That's what causes it. Dehydration and stress.
Certainly
and
stress.
So all the things that we did, dehydrating, diuretics, not eating salt, and the drugs that you take that you get dehydrated as well, and the stress, training on stimulants, all that causes it.
Well, certainly,
I'm 100% sure.
That's absolutely true. No, that's shown in the research. Major stressful life events are associated with the initiation of Crohn's and colitis. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so you're saying you got colitis after the show?
So I got colitis, and then I got my colon removed. And then even though they fixed me, in my head, I just thought like bodybuilding was over. So, I didn't know what to do. So I just got involved in a bunch of stupid shit. Got mixed up with like some stripper chick.
That's and a good sign. That never ends well.
Yeah. And I was selling gear like actually, when I was living with Mike, I bounced in nightclubs down in Hollywood, and I sold gear. And I was like literally supplying Olive Gold's Venice at one point.
Okay, here I want to ask you a brief question, although I know it probably is out of. I just want to know, since Rich passed away, was Rich involved in that scene at that time, or was he involved in it later? Rich Piana.
So I don't know, because I didn't really meet Rich until the 90s.
Oh, okay.
And actually, I met him in the 90s at Gold's Northridge at John's gym. So that's when I first met Rich. And then when I met him, he was already dealing. And he actually ended up being one of my distributors when I was like running the big lab down in Mexico.
Oh, really? Okay.
Mhm.
So you're saying you got into selling steroids, which weren't illegal at the time. So it was a little bit of gray area, right?
It wasn't illegal, but so what happened was I got in some stupid bullshit with some chick, and she took off with my car, left me stranded at this building. And long story short, I found out where she was. I went over to get my car because it had 2 crates of steroids in the trunk. My car wasn't there, but she was there. I kicked the door in, and her friends had already called the cops. So the cops came, arrested me. And first they charged me with some just like breaking and entering, some stupid thing, nothing much. And I bailed out. But one of her girlfriend's father was like the head detective at West Valley Station. So they changed the charges to, well, then they raided my house and they found these 2 big crates of steroids. And I had a Mac 11 sub 80 machine gun with a suppressor on it.
With a suppressor?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't even hear that part of your story originally. You know, in LA now, a suppressor will get you 10 years immediately. And I think it's a federal sentence too. I don't know about back then how it was.
At the time, I went to the Great Western Americana Gun Show and I bought this Mac 11 380 because you could. It was a kit. You had to put it together.
They sold suppressors there?
No.
Okay.
just the gun, just right. in pieces.
Yeah.
And people always like, you can't buy a gun. Yes, you can. It's like, it came in just pieces.
Absolutely.
And it came with you had to put it together. And when I went to buy ammunition at some gun store, I met this crazy Vietnam dude. And he showed me how to put the gun together. And then he showed me how to make a suppressor, which is pretty easy. You just make it out of a car muffler.
Yeah.
And so I made this thing.
Let's mention to this thing it's such an odd facet of California life is that everybody who's listening to this who's not from California knows we have the strictest gun laws ever, other than New York probably. We have very strict gun laws. But when I moved to California 6 years ago or so, I was surprised to notice that even my most docile, introverted friends had like 4 or 5 guns at home. Everybody in Cal, you get offered a gun all the time living in California. I've been offered to machine guns, all kinds of things like that. So I assume you were just buying it for fun, being a young guy.
I just, Arnold Schwarzenegger was playing Rambo and this and that, and I saw it, and I'm like, this is cool. And I had it, and I'd go down in the parking lot of my apartment building, I'd shoot tires. That's where I had it. I wasn't really going to do anything with it. I just had it because I just thought I should. But another reason I had it because a lot of my friends back then were selling coke. I didn't do that, but they were big time. Mm-hmm. And people were getting killed and robbed and all this stuff. I mean, I could go on and on about how different people that got killed or doing that, robbed, went to prison, various things. Mm-hmm. So they all had guns, and I figured, well, I better have one too, just in case.
Yeah.
Plus, being on trend, I think that makes you paranoid.
Not Boston, though, apparently. But anyway, so they got you with the gun. Did they find the gun in the place?
No, the gun was in the center console of this Jeep that I was driving. And they found the gun, and then they raided my house, and they found the steroids. And then they just decided they were going to throw the book at me. So they just made up a bunch of charges. They charged me with attempted kidnapping, attempted murder, attempted burglary, a whole bunch of attempted stuff.
Yeah, the first thing they'll do for the audience who hasn't been through legal trouble before, especially if it's your first crime and you don't know a good lawyer. Now, the funny thing is, you could pay $30,000 to get a good lawyer, but he doesn't know anybody in the DA's office, so he can't help you. He can just go buy the book. What you really need is a lawyer who has connections. But when they have connections, they talk to each other, they lie in your deal. But if you don't know this, you're a young guy like Larry was, they throw you as many charges as possible to scare you, even though they know they can't get convictions on them. So you see like 5 charges, maximum sentence is 20 years, you accept the plea. Meanwhile, if they actually took it to trial, they drop all those charges and leave 1 or 2 that they know they can get you from before,
I wanted to go to trial, but my lawyer told me, no, we can't go to trial with this. They're going to hang you.
Yeah.
You're going to get life.
It's all about the advice you get. And sometimes we have to take
basically, I already had paid the lawyer $30,000, and then they put me back in, raised my bail to $1 million. And then he was basically quitting on me because I couldn't pay him anymore.
So what was LA County like in the year you went in? Which year was it? 80s?
Yeah, it was mid 80s, late 80s, actually.
So that was the most violent jail in the United States at the time. What was it like being a 20-year-old?
It was like 80% black, like 17% Mexican, and maybe 3% white. And if you were white, you were a target.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I would be just fighting just because.
And the county jail is actually more violent than the prisons, except for the stabbings. In terms of fighting, you're under constant threat.
Well, it's different because in prison, there's rules and there's politics. And also when you get to prison, it's more evenly balanced. So, you have maybe 30% white, 30% Mexican, 30% black, or whatever it was, and the Mexicans and the whites side together against the blacks. So the blacks don't do what they do in the county, which is whatever they want to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, when you go to prison as a white guy, how if you're Mexican, you can't really, I think since the 80s, it was like that then. Mexicans couldn't fight each other. Soreños couldn't fight each other. They have rules. They don't get into fist fights with each other. If there's a disciplinary thing, the boss in the unit will discipline the guy and they'll jump him out or something. Whereas with the blacks, there's not really rules. They can fight each other whenever they get in an argument, so they're very aggressive in fighting. Caucasians with the woods in prison, did you have rules that you guys couldn't get into fights, or was it like the Mexicans, or was it a free-for-all like with the African Americans?
So that's not really true. There's rules for everybody in prison. Blacks, Mexicans, whites, there's rules. You can't just do whatever you want.
No, I mean, you as a black, you can get into a fist fight with another black without it becoming a gang subject. You can have a one-on-one. But
when I first got to Corcoran, they made me go in the cell and fight this big white guy.
Yeah, I was thinking the whites don't have those rules. They're always fighting each other also, right?
No, blacks mostly fist fight. In prison, there's not a whole lot of fist fighting going on. It's stabbing.
In prison, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was talking more about LA County Jail. So when you were there, were the Twin Towers open or was it just the old county?
The Twin Towers were open, but it was federal.
And there was, just for the audience to know how bad this county jail is, there was a gang of just sheriffs that were arrested 4 years ago called the 3000 Gang. These sheriffs were all like over 6 foot, muscular, on steroids, actually had tattoos for their gang. And when you were in county jail, you just didn't have to worry about being beat up by all the other races, your own race, but also the cops would be beating you up. This only stopped.
Actually, one of them was a good friend of mine. He trained at World Gym in Santa Monica, and a big, gigantic sheriff named Troy Pennington. And when Mike Mentzer was in the county jail for a short period of time, I told him Mike's there, and he hooked him up with extra food and whatever.
No way! I've heard about them. I never met any of those guys. They're legends.
But the sheriffs were jacked. I mean, huge. They were all jacked, and they all trained at Golds and Worlds.
So you spent in this toughest jail, and then you got sentenced to prison at 12 years. And you chose a life in prison not to get involved in the bad stuff or may let it make you worse, because afterwards you became a salesman, so you must have taken care of yourself. One of the difficult things for like a 20-year-old that goes to jail or prison is you just lost everything outside. And so sometimes your life can just become that place. So sometimes I feel like that's why people will go into jail with a 2-year charge and end up there for 20 years, because they try to develop a reputation in jail. How did you decide to let that go, those 12 years, and focus on your schooling and everything else and not get involved in anything?
So this is an interesting thing happened. When I was first in the county jail, one day I was going to court, and there was a really big black guy with dreadlocks in one of the holding cells waiting to go to court. You could obviously see he lifted. And so I started talking to him. He said, I came down from San Quentin. I'm going to court. And I said, how long are you there? And he's like, I've been there 18 years. I said, how come you don't have any tattoos? He said, I don't need tattoos to be tough. And I looked at him. I thought, yeah, me neither. I don't need that. And, I could handle myself pretty well, like, fighting wise.
But did being muscular make you a target? Like for people that want to show off when you first came into county and other places?
Not
so much.
No, because I just beat the shit out of them.
Mm.
So like you're a target until they find out you can fight, and then they don't want to fuck with you.
That's true. Yeah. But initially, yeah, being a little bit bigger, you can attract some attention.
I always fought like in the county. I always fought like a bunch of guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was never.
We're not giving you head ups.
Oh hell no.
Oh wow.
It was like I was always fighting blacks, and there was always like they just jumped me. 20 of them would be coming after me.
Wow, that's
actually. I mean, it would start off maybe with one guy, but it turned into right away I'm fighting everybody until sheriffs came and broke it up or whatever happened.
The nice thing that nowadays it's a little bit different. Like in the prisons now, they don't rape people as much in the California prisons.
It didn't happen back then either.
Oh, really? I heard it used to happen back then sometimes.
Well, it did if you're a punk and you like did stupid stuff, but I mean, there's rules.
Now in the county jail, if I don't know how it is a Caucasian, but in the blacks, you're always gonna get a head up, but it may be in a row. So you may have to fight one guy if you're a gang member. You fight one guy from that gang, then the rest in a row. It's very rare that they'll pile up on somebody or beat them up. Only a couple of places they do that. Actually, in the 4,000 floor, 5,000 floor right now. But anyway, moving past. So how did you protect yourself for those 12 years, mentally? Invest in yourself and not give up on your life.
You know, honestly, I competed against Sean Ray, and the whole time when I was in prison, I got the magazines. Literally, I got the Flex magazines, the Muscle and Fitness magazines through the mail order. And I always thought to myself, I'm going to get out and compete as a bodybuilder. This is not me. I'm not going to be part of this stuff. Mm. I just had no interest in those people. Mm. I mean, I got to Corcoran and, they're really ignorant. They can't spell, they can't read, they can't write. Just a bunch of hicks. Mm. So I didn't really associate with a whole lot of people. Mm. Maybe, a handful of people I would talk to, but I just kind of stayed as myself. I had no interest in being involved in any of that stuff. And then I got lucky after I was in Corcoran for about a year and a half. I got transferred to CMC on a medical. Mm. And my mother's husband at the time was a psychologist, and he pulled some strings and got me to stay there, which was a good thing.
Yeah.
Because CMC, they had college there and they had a powerlifting team. Oh. And so I got a job working as a rabbi's clerk. So I had my own little office there, and I just go and type his memos and could sit in his office and work on my schoolwork. And they had on every yard, there was a weight pile, but then there was an actual gym for the powerlifting team. Oh, wow. Like a full on gym with like badass equipment and everything. So, I mean, that's all I did is trained and went to school. I mean, that was my life. I got up, I'd go to work, I'd go train, go to college at night. That's it.
What do you think removing the weights from the prisons has done to people psychologically?
I think that's the stupidest thing they ever could have done.
Yeah.
And it's not in everywhere, because when I was in TI in the federal, they still have the weights.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In TI, they have the weights.
Musclehead still has a full weight room in his jail too.
No way. Wow. A lot of places in California, people fill up water bags. It's like one of the most things. You're doing like a water bag and then pull up.
They got rid of the weights because they said the inmates were getting too big and they were going to overpower and intimidate the guards and whatnot. Hmm. And prisoners were getting out of prison. They were all jacked. I mean, guys got big because, I mean, all you did for years is lift weights and eat and sleep. And, but the weights gave you an outlet where you could go take out your aggression instead of getting violent and fighting people and stabbing and all this other stuff.
So, Larry, after that huge experience of sacrifice, and then you got out and got your life on track, being a salesman, doing exceptionally well, what was it that made you risk breaking the law again? And I know it started in some way where you thought, I'll be outside the country as a steroid manufacturer in a country where it's legal and I'll have licenses and so on. But weren't you a little bit worried after losing all those years?
So when I was with Vector for 10 years selling Cutco, and I became a district manager. And I was with this woman, and we had a kid. And after 6 months, she one day took off with the kid and went to Florida.
Oh, wow.
Just took my kid and split.
Oh, that's great.
So at that point, I think mentally, I just was like, fuck it. And I was getting sick of Vector because I had qualified for promotion over and over again for like 5 years, and they weren't going to give me the promotion. They finally just came out and told me we're not going to do it because I just didn't kiss ass properly. Mm. And in that corporate environment, you know, they want you to do what they want you to do. And I didn't go along with it. Even though I outperformed 95% of everybody in the company, I still didn't go along with everything that they did. Mm. So they just weren't going to give me the promotion. So I quit that and I went to some company called Carico International, and they wanted me to duplicate what I did for Vector for them. And I did it. Mm. And I produced big numbers, but then they couldn't fill the orders the first summer out. So they actually flew me to Florida, wine and dined me, and told me go back to California and kick ass. And I did it. And then they couldn't fill the orders. And then because they never had anybody sell so much. Mm. So then they were going to pay my reps and me until they could fill the orders, and they were on back order. So I was like, screw this. Mm. So then I was like managing a couple gyms, and it wasn't making enough money. And right about that time, you know, Dr. Cohen was down in Mexico running the steroids for like, I don't know, 10 years.
Bostin, you heard of this guy before?
I've not, no.
Yeah.
You don't remember, well, this is before you. This was, so there was Dankel, there was Animal Power, there's Quality Vet. I mean, they supplied the whole U.S. market out of Mexico for like a decade. Wow. Like everybody's got their gear from there. And this guy, Dr. Cohen, he was actually, there was different companies, but he actually owned all of them. So it seemed like they were competing against each other, but he was ahead of the whole thing. And actually, for years, I used to go down to Mexico and get all this stuff. And then they busted Dr. Cohen, and they just took Mexico out. Like everything went dry. There was no gear, no real gear, like for probably a year. Mm. I think it was around 2005. They popped him around Balco. Mm. And I guess he made some deal with him that he'd stop doing it if they let him go or whatever he did.
Wait, on this note, because we're going to talk about this later, do you see that most of the steroid dealers, when they got busted, do most of them cooperate or not? But the reason I ask is because usually a lot of the steroid dealer people they don't have the criminal code. They're not like prison people or something like that. So is it easier for them to rat people out? Because I know you pride yourself on not doing that, and I've heard in some of your interviews. So
I would say that's not just steroids, that's just in general.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, is it more common in steroids than normal drug dealing, or is it the same? It's not even.
You know, I couldn't tell you that, but all I can tell you is pretty much everybody that gets busted, almost 99% rats. Mm. Yeah. I mean, I had my best friend try to set me up when I was a teenager.
Wow. Yeah.
He got busted with cocaine and tried to set me up.
Wow.
And I got tipped off about it. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just like.
So you said there was a drought in Mexico and that tempted you to.
Yeah. So there was no gear. Mm. And I was kind of pissed off about it because like they made real good quality gear. And actually I used to go down to Mexico and get it. And they had a driver that drive it back, and I would sell that stuff. Mm. And then I just saw an opportunity. There was like, you'd go to the pharmacies down there, there was nothing. It was just dry. Mm. So I got this idea that I'll just go down there and start a lab and take over.
Which, by the way, you're not the only person who does things like that. I mean, John Romano also, it's not a completely outlandish idea, you know. So you moved over there and you partnered with a guy called Nordic, who remains mysterious.
Yeah.
But you guys started developing your manufacturing there. And interestingly, you were working on the products yourself physically. But you were able to eventually generate revenue of $100,000 a week.
Mm-hmm.
So the last guy got busted. The second you make $100,000 a week, do you go, wait a minute, the last guy got busted. Maybe I should save for 4 weeks and quit. Or is it just never comes into mind because it's coming so smooth? You think it's legal. How does that work?
So when Operation Raw Deal went down, I was the last one to get busted. Literally the last one. I watched everybody get busted before me. I didn't know them personally, but I saw it on the news. This lab got popped. I mean, they were rounding up everybody in the whole world.
Oh, wow.
And so I was watching everybody get busted. And I actually hired Rick Collins. I retained him before I got popped. And when I first contacted him, I said, Rick, I think they're going to come after me. I need to retain you. And he goes, well, there's no charges against you, so you can't retain me. I said, well, how about I'll just give you 10 grand and you just have it just in case, because I have a feeling something's going to happen. So he's like, okay. And I was in Mexico and I'm like, okay, I'm in Mexico and I'm hidden away outside of their jurisdiction. And I just thought that I was safe and I'll just stay there. Mm. But they already knew everything. Because Hushmail was a encrypted email, a server out of Canada, and everybody used it.
Like Proton Mail now.
Yeah, but we were all under this delusion that it was safe. So, they went to Hushmail, they subpoenaed the records, and Hushmail gave it all over, and they knew everything.
And for the audience to know, this doesn't just happen if you subpoena. Right, recently, you guys heard about the FBI doing that app, the Anom app. It's an encrypted messaging service. The FBI actually owned it. So everything that everybody sent on it, they had from the beginning, and they just did a sting on everyone. Anyway, so be very careful, people.
Yeah, I mean, if you think that they can't get your stuff, believe me, they can get your stuff. Mm. Yeah, there's nothing.
That's what I tell people. They're like, "Do you have a Proton Mail account?" And I'm like, "No, man." I'm like, "That's just fucking dumb." If they want to see what you're doing, they'll see what they want.
They can see if they. There's a lot of ways they can see what you're doing. Anything that's electronic, they can look at what's happened with the Bitcoin. Remember, there was that ransomware with Bitcoin, and the company paid millions of dollars in Bitcoin, and then the government went and got it and got the Bitcoin back from the ransom people.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
And that's supposed to be all encrypted and safe, and you can't trace it and touch it. They got it, and they got it.
So was it the DEA then that was looking into you at that point when they got the Hushmail?
The DEA was the one running the investigation for Raw Deal.
Okay.
But like I said, I was outside their jurisdiction. So they legally, and they didn't have anything on me. They never busted me doing a transaction with any products. I was in Mexico the whole time. Mm. They didn't catch me selling anything. Mm. They just had emails basically, and it was all made up names and stuff, but they knew, because I didn't actually sell to people. I had 5 distributors. Which Rich Piana happened to be one of them.
Oh, okay.
And I only sold to these 5 distributors. The minimum order was $30,000.
Oh.
And then these 5 distributors that were in different places in the world sold to everybody else. Mm. So I had a website that people would go on there. It would just show them the products and pictures, and I'd post all the lab results from every batch that we made. Because I had a lab in Utah that every batch we had tested, and I'd post the results. Oh. So millions of people would see that. They knew the company, but I wouldn't deal directly with any end user. They'd have to get it through one of those distributors.
Well, that makes sense.
Piana used to sell to everyone in San Fernando Valley. Even my dad was buying stuff from him back then.
And he was buying from me.
Yeah, this really fills up a lot of things in my, because I knew about Piana also, so now we have the connection.
And then he tried to set me up.
Did he really?
Mm-hmm.
Really? I didn't know that. Was he like that?
Oh, hell yeah. He got busted numerous times and he just routed his way.
That's what I was always wondering. How did he never get busted? He's in California, 30 years of dealing. You'd think that they'd catch him at some point.
Yeah, he contacted me one time. He goes, I don't want to do this mail order stuff anymore. This is after we've been doing this for like over a year. He goes, I want to meet in person. I'm like, why? He goes, well, I just rather do it that way. We could meet at a gym somewhere like in Orange County, and you could like leave the stuff in a locker and, I'll leave the money or something like this. And I'm like, I'm out of the country. I don't go to the US. I'm not doing this. I'm like, no, why? You've always got your product. You send the money and the product arrives in the mail at your house. What do I need to meet you for? Mm. So he was for sure trying to set me up.
That does sound very suspect. Very suspect.
I mean, there was no reason for me to meet him.
Yeah, that's very weird. So they didn't have a direct link. So they reach out instead to the Mexican authorities.
They did that with like not only just me, but like there was British Dragon was in Thailand, and they got the Thailand government to go arrest them.
Oh, okay.
And extradited them to the United States to stand charges. Mm. And yeah, they couldn't legally like go get me in Mexico. Yeah. Because I hadn't actually broken any law in the United States.
Yeah.
They couldn't get a warrant to go pick me up or anything. They didn't have a case. So they contacted the Mexican authorities and told them to go get me.
One would think though, like Mexico, we know extradites. Like hell, we know that. Nicaragua, why didn't you think of, because all of South America is sort of puppets of the United States, but some of them are a little rebellious. You would have thought like if you were in Venezuela or Nicaragua, you might not have gotten extradited. Whereas in Mexico, we know, but it's even worse. To be honest with you, I've never been to Mexico myself because I'm so afraid of kidnappings. Like I know it's a weird thing to bring up, but like I almost worked in Brazil. I was offered a job there and I rejected it because I had a Brazilian girlfriend at the time and I knew a bit about it. And I was like, there's too many kidnappings, bro. I don't want to be kidnapped. So I refused to go to Brazil, refused to go to Mexico, even though nobody wants to kidnap me. I don't have anything. But you got almost extradited. And then the worst scenario.
No, I didn't even get extradited.
They didn't even bother with that.
No, they actually just contacted the Mexican police and they sent the cartel to go pick me up.
The Ariano Felix cartel, right?
Yeah.
And that's the really vicious one in Tijuana, right? Mm-hmm. That had the Mexican mafia carnals working there, and they killed a cardinal. I don't know if you remember, in the airport there once by mistake.
They were pretty vicious people. Yeah. So, but they could care less what the United States wanted. They wanted money. Mm-hmm. And actually, what happened was, when the cartel came and got me, they didn't even know it was about steroids. They thought that I was a meth dealer.
Oh, wow.
Because there was a guy that was working for me down in Mexico, just some worker that bottled crap. And he got involved in running meth for the cartel. And I found out about it. So I fired him like 6 months earlier. Mm. It was a mistake firing him. I should have took him out back and got rid of him.
That guy came after you.
So no, he got busted going across the border, and he ratted out to the U.S. Police about me and where I was. But since they couldn't get me, they contacted the Mexican police, who is the cartel. And people don't seem to understand this. It's not like they work with the cartel. They're the same guys.
They have a day job and a night job.
Yeah, and the day job, they are police and they go around like just robbing people. They'll pull you over and just hold you up for money. Yeah. And then at night they kidnap.
My God, that's crazy.
So they're the same guys, actually. So they got me, and originally when they were questioning me, they said, they're asking me about the ephedrine. I'm like, I don't have any ephedrine. I'm like, you raided my house. You were there. There's no ephedrine. What the hell are you talking about? And then, I got to talking with some of the guards that were watching me. I actually got them to be kind of friends with me. And they told me, well, I guess we fucked up. We weren't even supposed to take you. But now that we got you and we know that you've got all this money, well, now it's kidnapped for ransom.
Hey, learning how to talk to guards from jail and prison is a useful skill, isn't it?
Yeah.
Learning how to chat, learning the mood, Anyway, so
Yeah, actually, I got this one guard on my side, and he probably saved my life because, like, he was put in charge of watching me all day long for about a week, and he kind of felt bad for me because he knew they were going to kill me, and he realized that I wasn't a meth dealer or a rival gang person or the normal people that they kidnap for some reason.
Mm.
They just got me kind of on accident. But since they had me and they found out I had a whole bunch of money, they figured, well, we'll get more money out of you.
Yeah, exactly. So they ended up torturing you, trying to get into both of your safes. You didn't even know the combination of the second safe. They pull off your toenail. And then you're imprisoned at some point with multiple people, right? With people watching over you for about 15, 16 days?
The whole thing lasted 16 days. I was in a couple different places. The first time I was in a safe house, I think it was outside Tijuana, but I don't really know because I was blindfolded and had leg shackles on and handcuffs. And then after like a week, they took me in a van and they took me somewhere that was like 3 hours from the border, somewhere. I don't know where, somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. And took me to this house. And there was a couple people with me. And then while I was, they took us to this one house for just maybe 2 or 3 days. And then they moved us to another house where there was a bunch of people. Mm. And they were just torturing people there for, information and trying to get money out of them and killing people.
So you're just hearing people screaming constantly. Yeah.
Well, I had blindfold on, but I could hear everything. And it's interesting. I saw this movie recently where there was this woman who lost her sight, but she got super aware of everything. And I can relate to that because when I was blindfolded, but under those conditions, I was super aware of everything, like every noise. I could hear everything that was going on. I was paying attention. And one night they brought in, I think it was 2 women and 2 men. And supposedly the guy had $1 million, the head guy, and the other 3 worked for him. And they were like torturing and messing with the women and the guys. And I don't know what happened actually, but after the first night, the 2 women and the 1 guy disappeared. I don't know if they let them loose or if they killed them. I don't know what they did. But the other guy, the one that supposedly had the $1 million, they beat him mercilessly, like day and night. And we could just hear the beating nonstop, trying to get him to give up this $1 million that he supposedly had.
Wow.
And I don't really think he had it because I think after that kind of beating for that long, he probably would have given it up.
Yeah.
I remember one time I went to the restroom and it was just covered in blood from that guy.
Now, are you a religious man, Larry? What's going on in your soul in these moments? Is it just a focus on how do I get out alive? Or is it I'm meeting my maker? Am I thinking of acceptance? Are you praying to God? Because it's a terrifying experience to be physically captive. I mean, by the way, we didn't even talk about this. Like prison, jail, all of this stuff is captivity. It's really harsh on the human soul. But this is a whole other level.
So, like the first few days, I'm terrified. Like, I'm not going to lie. I was scared to death. I thought for sure I'm going to die. Like any moment, I'm just waiting for them to kill me. And I'm thinking of how they're going to kill me. Mm. And that's when they did they came and asked me for the combination of the safe. They pulled my toenail out, beat me in the head and a bunch of stuff. But then they told me that if I gave them the combination of the safe and they got the money, that they would release me. So the guard came, the one that made friends with me came and told me, hey, they got the money and the Hefe's really happy. He's happy because they got like a couple $1 million out of my safe and they're going to let you go. And then he came back and he wasn't so cheerful. And he said, they're going to take you somewhere.
That was the guard you liked?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where they're going to transfer me. And I'm like, what's going to happen. He's like, I don't know. Like, he didn't want to say.
Yeah, I know that feeling when, he knows something you don't know and he doesn't want to comment on it. Yeah.
He didn't want to say. And I'm like, okay, now they transfer me in this van. And while they were transferring me, they put me on the phone with my brother for just a few seconds to prove that I was alive. And I just said to him, what happened to Denise, my wife? And he said, no one knows where she is. So I thought they killed her. Yeah. And at that point, just something a switch flipped in my head. I went from being scared to angry because I was like, you guys just lied to me. You got the money and now and then they told me they need another $1 million.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, well, you got all the money. And they're like, well, your family has money. Your family owns jewelry stores. I'm like, no, they don't. Well, your brother owns a gym. I'm like, he doesn't have $1 million. Like, you might as well just kill me now because they don't have any money to give you. But I was trying to stay alive. So I told them, look, they don't have any money, but I have a storage in the US that has a couple $1 million worth of steroids. And if you take me there, I'll give it to you. So I was trying to use this to just bargain my way out of this situation.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, I just realized that they weren't going to let me go. They already got my money. I thought they killed my wife. And something happens in your head and you just go into like survival mode. It's just like, you just have to survive.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
and it's good you did because you basically pulled out a miraculous, heroic movie.
Well,
like
emotions don't matter at this point because now it's just about staying alive.
So how did you get that bravery that one day when the guards were sleeping to talk to the
one day? I was plotting it from the moment they got me. I was thinking of the weight. Like, they had me blindfolded, but as soon as they got me, I had to know where I was. So I was like pulling up the thing and then I'd pull it down, and I was constantly like trying to think of a way out of this. And when they first had me, I had like leg shackles and handcuffs on. So there's no way I was going anywhere. But when they transported me, they took the leg shackles off. They were cutting into my ankles. You couldn't even walk in those things. So they had to take them off just so I could walk to the van to get in so they could move me. And then when we got to the new place, the guards there were just like some teenage kids with machine guns. And the jefes would come in the middle of the night and do the, torturing and all of this stuff and interrogations and whatnot. And they were talking to me pretty much all the way to like the last couple days. And then they just stopped talking to me. And then I knew, like, I think we're coming to the end of this. Like, they're not asking me any more questions. And they're telling me they're pissed off with my brother because he's not coming up with any money. And the guards before had told me that the way it works is if your family pays the ransom, they let you go. And if they don't, then they kill you. And they finally did kill one guy like the night before we took off. They brought in some guy, I guess he was supposedly a rival gang member. And the whole time I was like, how are they going to kill us? Are they going to shoot us? They're going to inject us with something. I didn't know what they were going to do. So this is how they do it. They laid the guy on the floor face down and he was handcuffed. And then one guard or a jefe guy is instructing some other guy of how to step on his neck. And he said, do it this way because otherwise you'll hurt your foot. So they just literally take a boot and snap the back of the neck.
Holy crap.
And then they just left him laying there on the floor all night next to us.
Wow.
And then the next morning they were arguing about, they wrapped him up in a sheet and tied him up with a cord. And they were arguing, the guards were arguing about who's going to throw him away in the dumpster because he was heavy.
Wow.
So I'm like, I saw that. I'm like, I'm not going out this way. It's like, you're not even human. You're just like a cockroach and they just snap your neck and kill you and throw you in the trash. No mess, no blood, no noise, no nothing.
Yeah, that's why they did that, for the lack of a mess. My God.
Yeah.
Proper butchering. Yeah.
So after I saw that, I'm just like, hell, I got to get the hell out of here. Because I knew, like, I told the guy, there was this kid with me, Oscar, and I said, we need to get out of here. We're next. And he goes, don't say that. I'm like, what do you mean don't say that?
Yeah, I don't like this Oscar fellow. He turns out to be a little annoying afterwards. I cannot believe that when you got across the fence. Anyway, you tell the story, but I would have hit him first and then continued running. But it was, what a traitor. Anyway, so Oscar wanted to go with you.
Yeah, so I'm like, I said, look, I'm first of all, they went to sleep every night, and I was told I had colitis, even though I didn't have the colitis, I had the pull-through surgery. So I have to go to the restroom, in the night. And they told me, if you want to go to the restroom, you have to whistle. So I hear we're whistling, and these fuckers aren't getting up. So I finally get up and I look, and they're sleeping. They're just sleeping in the other room. And so I took myself to the restroom, and I come back and they're just sleeping, and they got the TV on, and these two guys are just sleeping. So first I'm thinking, I'll get their guns and we'll shoot them and then get out of here. But I couldn't. I literally walked around them while they were sleeping, and I couldn't see the guns. I think they were sleeping on top of them. I knew they had.
I was wondering why you didn't take the guns. Okay, that filled in.
I couldn't. I think they had them underneath them.
Yeah.
Because that's what the first thought was. So then Oscar says, "You jump on the one guy, and I'll jump on the other guy." And I'm like, "Hell no! I could do that, but he's a little skinny dude."
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't trust that. That guy's going to come up with a gun and shoot us both.
Yeah.
So I said, look, they're sleeping. We can just walk right out. And actually, when I went to the restroom, I had walked down this corridor and looked down a stairway into like a garage, and there was body bags down there. And I was like, hell, I got to get out of here. So I just told Oscar, I said, look, I'm leaving. Are you going to come or not? He goes, no, it's too risky. I said, staying here is too risky. I'm out. So I literally tiptoed right past their nose. Like the one guy walked right past him, tiptoed down the stairs into this courtyard. And it was a big fence, about maybe 10 feet high. It was a wooden fence, but still. And the only way out was this like electric garage. And I was thinking, I don't want to push that because it's going to make noise and wake them up. And so I'm looking where to get out. And right then Oscar comes down. I guess he decided to follow me. So he's like, lift me over the fence. And he was so skinny, he actually was able to pull his hands out of the handcuffs. So he had his hands loose. So I lifted him up. He scales the fence. He comes down, makes a boom on the other side, and dogs start barking.
So Larry, future lesson. If another guy can get himself out of the handcuffs, we should tell him to help us get up first, since he has the two hands. That tricky bastard. Anyway.
Yeah. So he looks at me and he just takes off running. I'm like, oh, now I'm fucked because the dogs are barking in the neighborhood. So I just pushed the garage door button. I scooted under there and I started hauling ass after him. And we're just running down this like broken up road in the middle of the night. And
heart rate 200 beats per minute.
Man, I was running barefoot over glass, and it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't going to look back. I just knew behind me there was guys with machine guns. I was getting out of there. So we ran into a bus depot, and then Oscar disappeared somewhere in the bus depot. I don't know where he went. I ran out on this highway, tried to wave down cars, but here I am, like literally in my underwear with a rag on my head and handcuffs, trying to wave over cars. No one's stopping in the middle of the night. So I run down the highway and I get to this taco stand, and there was a bunch of guys in there, down there. They're like eating in the taco stand in the middle of the night. This is what they do. So I run in there and I'm like, hey, I kidnapped, I need help. And they're like, sit down, have a taco. I'm like, no, man. I like, get me to the border. They like, do you want us to call the police? I'm like, no, police. The police is kidnappers. And they know the people that live down there, they know. So these guys are like, okay. I'm like, look, I'll pay you. Just take me to the border. So they're like, okay, come on. So I get in the back of this van and they drive me all the way to Oda Mesa border.
Thank God.
Which was a couple hours drive.
Yeah. Guardian angels really saved your life.
Yeah, they were nice guys. And we got to the border, like I ran out and ran up to the border, and the border guy's looking at me, like, what are you doing like this? And I said, look, I'm kidnapped, let me in. And they were pretty suspect because here I am like in underwear with rag on my head from the bandana, blood all over me. And
hey, at least you're white. If this happened to me, they wouldn't let me in. They'd be like, no, you're Mexican. You're not American because I'm half. You two could get across the border. I literally couldn't without my passport.
Well, so then the two guys came up and they started harassing him. I'm like, no, they're okay. They helped me get here. They're good. So then they let me in, and they took the handcuffs off, and they gave me a blanket, and they gave me like a sandwich, sack lunch. And FBI came, and they were interviewing me about like what was going on. And of course, I didn't tell them anything about steroids. I just told them I was kidnapped. And these Mexican police, supposedly police, come in and they said, we want you to take us to where the kidnapping is. And we're going to protect you. And I'm like,
we want you to take us back to your death.
Yeah. And I'm not going back in there. No way. And the FBI guy goes, well, we can't make him go. Like they wanted me to go with them and show them where the house was. Like I could even find it.
It's lunacy. I would never go back to the country again.
No. So a couple minutes later, DEA comes in and they're like, we're going to take him from here. And FBI goes, what's going on? There's something you didn't tell me. And I'm like, so DEA takes me and puts me in the back of this car and they're driving me up to San Diego. And on the way, they asked me, do you know John Romano? And I'm like, I know of him. They go, what do you think about him? I'm like, he's all right. And they said, there was a bodybuilder in the morgue beaten to death, and we thought it was you. It was unrecognizable. He goes, you weren't supposed to come back.
Yeah.
And so they took me up to DA headquarters, and they actually had already arrested my wife. They called her and my brother. They came down to get me at the border, and they arrested her. And then when we got up there, for some reason, they decided to let us like see each other. I think maybe they were trying to hear what we're saying, or I don't know what. But she told me that they told me you're really dirty and this and that and whatever. And I said, don't say anything. Don't say a word. She goes, I already told them I'm not saying anything.
Another lesson for the audience. Every time you're arrested by cops, they'll make you feel like you do yourself a huge favor if you just answered them, especially if you feel innocent. If you're innocent and a cop arrests you, you want to tell them, hey, dude, I didn't do this. Don't ever say you didn't do this. Lawyer. Even if you didn't do it, lawyer. Anything you say, they're allowed to lie to you and get stuff out of you and bring that into court even if they lied. So just for the audience to know, I know you know this obviously, Harry, but for everybody else, save yourselves. Never answer a cop's question. Always lawyer first.
So then they asked me, they said, if you cooperate with us, we can help you. And I said, what am I being charged with? And they said, well, it could be this, it could be that. I said, how much time is that? And he said, well, it could be 5 years. I said, it could be. I said, I want my attorney. And then one guy started getting belligerent. The other guy goes, no, he invoked his right. That's it. So after that, they just took us up to San Diego Federal Detention Center. My wife went to court and she got bonded out on, I don't remember how much her bond was, like a couple $100,000 or whatever. And they tried to argue no bail for me. Rick Collins sent in this really good attorney and he argued, and my mom came down and said, he's been here his whole life. He's not a flight risk. And they didn't even have a case at that point.
Oh, another comment by there for listeners. If you don't have family members and you go to court to see a judge, if you don't have anybody representing you, they think way worse of you. If you have a mother, a sister, a brother, it makes a big difference. Yeah.
And anyways, so the lawyer argued bond, and I got a $1 million property bond. So I got out on property bond. My mom put up the house.
Now I know you're gonna talk to us now about like basically you guys restarted a gym in San Diego, and your wife and you basically got to an agreement where you spent 2 years in prison. I really want to talk to you about that, but before we skip over the kidnapping, because kidnapping is such an interesting thing. Pablo Escobar created an organization in his country, Colombia, called Death to Kidnappers in I think the 80s or 70s, because there were so many kidnappings in Colombia, it was destroying people's lives. Mexico is also notorious for kidnappings. And really, what I wanted to talk about is the crazy amount of trauma, how it affected you psychologically afterwards. Because if you remember in the 70s, there was that Getty guy. He went to Italy and he got kidnapped by those mafia, the 'Ndrangheta people. They cut his ear off. Remember those stories when you were young? They would say, if you get kidnapped, they'll send your ear out. It was all because of that Getty guy. He got his ear cut off. And he was held by the 'Ndrangheta in Italy for only a few months, maybe a year. After that experience, man, he was only in his teenies, late teenage years, early 20s. He ended up a drug addict, couldn't control it. By his 40s or mid 40s, he became a paraplegic because of a stroke from the drug addiction. It just destroyed the man's psyche and life. Just those few weeks of being held captive. How did you recover mentally from that level of extreme stress that changes one's life? I mean, and how do you compare it to those years of prison, getting into fights, fear over your life constantly? And how do you work on recovering from both of those things?
So, to be honest with you, I think that being in prison for so long when I was young was what enabled me to survive that, because I had already developed that ability to shut off my emotions. Like I can just shut them off and feel nothing, like go numb. So when they had me, like I said, I was terrified for the first few days, but after that, I just shut off. I just went in survival mode and just felt nothing. And like when I first got out of prison when I was young, I think it took probably a few years just to be normal. And I didn't even know what that meant, what normal. What I meant is I just didn't feel anything. So I was really good at selling knives, at selling anything, because I didn't care if somebody said no.
Interesting.
Didn't matter to me, I could just close and close and close. And if they said no, I just keep closing anyways.
So after the kidnapping, you didn't deal with a particular difficulty emotionally for the next few months, just because of fearing for your life like that. You were already toughened up by the years of prison and jail and all that kind of stuff, huh?
I don't think I probably took it like other people would.
Exactly, because in prison and jail, your life or your physical health is constantly under threat.
Yeah,
so
even when I was in prison, when I was young, there was I was put in isolation one time because there was some escape plot that I had nothing to do with. But they locked me in isolation for like 3 weeks and did their own little torturing thing in there. There was a period of time after that when I first got home where like a bird would chirp and I'd be up looking around.
Yeah.
I just wake up and be like looking out the window, like is someone out there or whatever. I remember I actually went to the psychologist shortly after I got home. And I told him what was happening. I told him I'm having problems sleeping. Can you give me something for sleep? And he goes, why would someone do that to you? Why would they kidnap you? Like, he didn't believe me. And I'm just like, what do you think? I'm making this shit up? I just want some fucking sleeping pills.
By the way, tip, one of my favorite ones, it's called Seroquel. Doesn't have those horrible addictive tendencies that the others do. If you ever want to check it out, Seroquel 50 milligrams on my worst night, a lifesaver. It changes my life.
Is that comparable to Ambien?
No, Ambien is the dangerous one. You can get addicted to that. It feels a little good. Seroquel doesn't feel good. Just puts you to sleep. Works really safely.
Actually, I've been on, they started me on Trazodone when I was in TI. And I've been on that for years, and Valium.
Trazodone is a great alternative to Seroquel. And you might find Mirtazapine, Very similar to Trazodone. People love it for sleep and very similar effects.
That's the one that for the appetite.
Yeah, that you didn't like. He tried it for 2 days, became
Well,
a
maybe
zombie.
Yeah, I was sleeping way too much.
Yeah, I take 100 milligrams of Trazodone and 10 milligrams of Valiant. I'm out.
Yeah. So, Larry, I didn't know this, but you reopened your gym, but not in San Diego. It's in the Valley, isn't it?
Ventura, actually.
Yeah, I was living close by to that a year and a half ago. I had no idea you were there. I was next to Scot's gym, which, by the way, brings up an interesting topic. So you and Scot have been longtime friends, but you guys slightly don't like each other. What's the deal behind that? I don't know how much we can get into it, but it's just funny to me because you're both nice guys and Scott's a little bit argumentative.
So he was like my workout partner for like a few years. And I'll just put it this way. We had a disagreement over some money. And I just told him to fuck off, basically. And then after I got out of prison, I ran into him at Venice Beach, and he like ran up behind me. Like, I think he was going to like try to hit me from behind. And I turned around and I saw him coming, and I was standing there with my dog. So I just got like this, ready to hit him.
I cannot imagine Scot running behind you trying to hit you with a
I like the crowd moved, and I just felt like something was. I turned around, and here's Scot, 330 pounds, coming towards me. So I backed up, and I went like that, and he's looking at me, and I'm like, "Don't fucking do it." I'm thinking, I'm just going to hit you right in your forehead and knock your ass out. And then he goes, "We just need to talk." So we talked, and then we kind of squashed it.
But the way he said it is, "We just need to talk." Like it's like 3 decibels lower than any human's voice.
Yeah. So then we kind of squashed it. We were okay for a little while. And then I went back, when I went into TI, a bunch of shit went down with him and my wife and my gym. And I was just like, fuck this guy.
Mm.
So
Larry, tell him the story about how he had you hit him.
So this is kind of funny. He's not going to like this. So this is earlier when I was training with him. And like, I literally trained with him for like 3 years. Like I was the only one that would show up all the time. But he would have these bench press sessions, and there'd be like 10 or 15 guys would show up to bench press on 2 bench presses. Mm. And he has this ritual where his wife slaps him before he does his heavy lift. So one day we're getting ready to bench, and his wife wasn't there, and he goes, whatever her name was, I forget, that she was like Filipino.
Yeah, Asian.
He says, she's not here. Who's going to hit me today? And no one says anything. I said, I'll do it. He goes, you can't do it. And I'm like, why not? He goes, you don't hit hard enough. I said, I'll hit you hard enough. He goes, no, you've tried it before and you didn't hit hard enough. I'm like, no, you've never let me.
That's exactly Scot.
20 guys and looking, he goes, I never let you. I go, no, you've never let me. And then so he's looking, and like everybody's listening. He goes, okay, you can do it.
Yeah.
So he stands there like this in front of the bench press. And the routine was 1, 2, 3 slaps. So I went 1, and the second one, I just got airborne while my palm went right in his freaking side of his head.
Oh, shit.
He dropped straight to his knees.
Oh, shit.
And he freaking goes like this.
He got his ear.
He goes, no, I didn't hit him in the ear. I hit him right here.
Oh, okay.
And he goes, he hit me in the ear. And he gets up, and I'm just waiting for him to like do something. I'm thinking, okay, we're going to fight now.
Yeah.
And his main workout guy, buddy, goes, he didn't hit you in the ear. He just hit you really hard. He just dropped straight down.
That's so
and then afterwards he goes, if you ever hit me that hard again, I'll kill you.
Yes, that's Scot. By the way, this story is very accurate. I can tell. That's Scott often is influenced by the crowd also. So like if he said you didn't do it in front of the crowd and he sees other people notice, he'll be like, no, I got to do it now. I know exactly how he is. That's so funny. Yeah, Scott's a cool guy. Scott's quite a character, very unusual. I don't think I've ever met anyone like him. But Larry, we usually record for only like an hour and a half, so I think we'll end this soon. We were going to go through some questions with you. I think we have to have you back on sometime.
We can do a part two. We can also do a part two.
Yeah, let's do a part two because I have some questions here and we can continue like in a couple of weeks.
Larry, I was going to ask you, was your wife with you when you got arrested? How did she get out of it?
So when the cartel came and got me, she was there and her daughter was there in the house. And they didn't mess with her. They let her go. And her and the girl, they didn't do anything to them.
And then how did she end up in the United States?
She just packed up everything she could in 2 SUVs with the dogs and her daughter, and she split across the border.
And then how did the feds get her from there?
Well, when they busted me, they called my brother, and her had been in contact with the FBI the whole time. So they called them and told them that they had me at the border. And when she came down to get me, they arrested her.
Wow.
The DEA arrested her, right?
The DEA arrested her. The FBI didn't.
You're saying she was already in contact in the FBI because she was like, my husband got kidnapped.
No, my brother was, but she was with my brother the whole time.
I imagine they were.
She was actually there in the house when you got kidnapped.
She was. And this is really interesting. Go on the video on Fresh Out. Her daughter was like 5 years old at the time or something. And she was living with us. And her daughter just posted a comment recently, said, all of this is true. I was there.
Wow. Yeah. It's a great
interview. A little girl.
But this is the thing. Do you think that the DEA charged, I think this is what Boston's curious about. Did the DEA charge your wife to pressure you? Was that the point of it?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what they had on her was kind of like nothing. They had nothing on me, like literally nothing. But they had a video of her in a post office, supposedly on a day when a package was mailed from that post office that ended up somewhere that had gear in it.
Yeah. So it was a weak thing. They were just trying to pressure you emotionally or make you to break, obviously.
Yeah. Well, when I hired my attorneys, I had to hire 2 attorneys, one for her and one for me. And I hired both of them. And I met with the attorneys and I said, here's the deal. No one's ratting on anybody. I'm not ratting on her. She's not ratting on me. And we're not ratting on anybody else. So let's get that straight from the beginning. So don't even bring it up. And after the whole thing was done, her attorney came to me and said, you know, they told me that if she cooperates, they'll let her go. And he just never even told her that that was an offer. He just told him she won't do it. I can't imagine it.
Yeah, exactly. Good guy.
She would have did it, by the way. But
you think so? Because I know afterwards she let you.
Yeah, she would have did it. But
she left you hanging with the gym, right? After you came out. I mean, that's the worst thing about going to prison and jail. Also, many people, guys don't realize this. You go to prison and jail, your girlfriend or wife will not be there when you're back. Or if she is, she's not going to be intact. Let's put it that way. Some other stuff happened. So your life just goes to hell when you do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I left her to run the gym. And I said, you know, it's only going to be a couple of years. And, you know, she hung in there for about a year. And then literally like 4 months before I'm going to get out, she just sold everything and took off.
But a nice note about this is while you're in prison, you can date other chicks who are obsessed with prison guys. So you can sort of replace the chick that you had before with these psychopathic letter chicks that you can then meet out when you go out.
Yeah, but
no, I'm just making a joke. Those things are so weird. I don't know how women
write them in person. You're not going to want to date them.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
I mean, I saw that, and when I was young in prison, there was like guys that were training all day long. Buff, young, good shape, and here comes this 400-pound heifer to do the conjugal visit.
All right,
I actually had one of those.
Leo, let me end it on one story about Larry so I could give you an example of how intense he is. Okay, this is actually pretty funny. So I'm like a 17-year-old kid, and I go to visit Larry at his gym. What was that gym called in Camarillo?
Body Temple.
Body Temple. So I go visit him. I'm 17 years old. I don't think you had an ankle bracelet on at that time, right?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so he did. So I went there. He's like, come check out the gym. He showed me his gym. It was actually a nice facility, more like a powerlifter facility. We sat down. We talked about steroids. We talked about bodybuilding. I was a teen bodybuilder getting into bodybuilding. And like he was like real intense, right? So fast forward, like later that year, I ended up moving to Northern California for college, and I had a girlfriend up there. So I didn't know anything of it, right? I didn't really know that Larry was like in the middle of a case or whatever. So I sent him a message. I'm like, hey, Larry, what do you think about pramipexole, like or cabergoline when I'm on tren, right? He freaks the fuck out. He's like, did you call me or message me? He's like, don't ever fucking talk to me about drugs on. He flipped out, right? And you know me being a class clown, I end up coming back down to NorCal. I end up moving back down to Southern California. And I'm like probably still 17, 18 around this time. And I tell my buddies, I'm like, dude, this guy just flips out when you talk about steroids. So we would prank call his gym. And we would be like, is Larry there? He'd be like, yeah, this is him. We'd be like, we want some Deca and testosterone. And dude, you'd be like, who the fuck is this? I'm gonna beat your fucking ass.
Bro, Larry's just like Scott in that way. If you want to piss Scott off, do the same thing. Call his home gym and say, hey, I want some Deca. He will freak the hell out. He'll be hunting you.
That must be like a powerlifter thing.
It's a powerlifter thing, I think. All right, guys, I'll let you be. Have a good night, brothers. We'll talk soon, huh?
Yeah,
Larry,
let's do a part 2.
Absolutely. It was such a pleasure, Larry. Thank you so much for joining us, brother.
Yeah.